Hi, my name's Moonpire and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today we're going to be taking a look at the numerous minor civilizations in Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition. Firstly, we're going to be taking a look at the importance of making use of natives in a treaty game. After that, we'll take a look at each of the minor civilizations that you're actually able to use in the treaty map pool. After that, we'll be taking a look at a tier list of all of the minor civilizations. First, let's take a look at some of the basics of natives. In Age of Empires 3, both a villager and an explorer have the ability to build a trade post. Now, a trade post can only be built in one of two specific building places. These building places are outlined on the map with either a circle or an arrowhead. If you build a trade post on the circle indicator, you will initially get regular deposits of experience, which will obviously allow you to get your home city shipments earlier. If you upgrade the trade post, this will increase the regularity in which you gain experience. Additionally, you can select to receive any of the three other resources instead. Now, typically in Treaty, you'll want to keep the experience trickle on until you have all your cards, in which case you'll then swap over to resources. Now, additionally, there is also the arrowhead indicator on the minimap, and this is basically telling the player that this is where a native settlement is. Now, before you actually build your trade post, you can actually click on the settlement and then press the Alt key, and it will actually show you the units that you're able to build, as well as the various upgrades that are available to you. This is obviously an extremely valuable thing to know because if you don't know what civilizations do, this will very quickly allow you to determine if you should be building a trade post earlier or later. As most of the upgrades from the minor settlements offer benefits from a military or economic perspective, if you're playing with a team, it is of benefit to ensure that all teammates get the upgrades. On a number of occasions, I've had a teammate who has put the trade post down, got the upgrades, and then been unwilling to actually delete the trade post and let me have the upgrades as well. Don't be that guy. So apart from the upgrades, why would you bother going Nats? Well, allying with a native civilization obviously gives you access to one or multiple of their units, which basically allows you to have a bigger military. This is because Nats don't actually use population space and are instead limited to a set number, which you can see by hovering over the unit in the settlement or the embassy. Now, a limiting factor of using natives is that all native units cost wood. Now, this contrasts with most other civilizations' units, where the majority of all civilizations, cavalry and infantry, cost coin and food. Now, obviously, some civilizations, cavalry and infantry do cost wood, but the increased number of units that you're making through the usage of natives puts further emphasis on every civilization's stockpile of wood. Now, I'll talk about this in a bit more detail a bit later on in the video, but people would typically alter the decks they use to account for the increased demand of wood required through the production of native units. Now, normally, you'd have to create the military units from the actual trade post, which in some instances means the units are going to have to run halfway across the map to get to the fight. Now, your explorer can actually build up to 3 native embassies, which will allow you to actually spawn these units much closer to the front lines. So after you've got your trade post set up, I'd highly recommend putting your native embassies in line with your forward base. Another important consideration are the upgrades for the actual native units. Now, on the actual settlement, there will be 2 upgrades that you'll be able to research just as you would for a normal military unit. Now, it's important to note there is actually another upgrade that increases the damage and HP of your native units by 50%. Now, this upgrade is available in the capital for European civilizations, and for other civilizations, it's available through the TC. But to get to it, you need to be in Age 5. Now, it's obviously extremely important to get this upgrade, and although it costs 1.5k wood and food, in the long term, it definitely has a significant return on investment. Now, with that in mind, let's take a look at the various native civilizations. Now, there are a whole lot of native civilizations in Age of Empires 3. I'll be touching on each of them, but I'll be specifically focusing on the native civilizations that are available through the treaty map pool. First, let's take a look at Andes, which features the Incas. Now the Incas, whilst they are both a civilization in Age of Empires 3, which were obviously introduced through Definitive Edition, they were previously a minor civilization, which were available through Andes. Now this minor civilization gives you access to two separate units. The first unit, which excels at dealing with cavalry and shock infantry, costs 100 food and 20 wood. Additionally, they count as heavy infantry and they're limited to 13 units. The second unit excels at dealing with heavy infantry and costs 40 food, 55 wood, counts as ranged infantry and is limited to 10. Now it's important to note that on Andes, each team has access to two separate native trade posts, which basically doubles this limit. So for the first unit, both teams are limited to 26 of the unit, and for the second unit, both teams are limited to 20. It's important to note that when I actually display a unit's stats, that these stats represent both of the upgrades in the trade post, as well as the 50% upgrade to damage and HP from the capital available in Age 5. And this will be reflected in all of the unit stats that I display from this point onwards. Now obviously every minor civilization also has a variety of military and economic upgrades that also go alongside them. Inca have 3. The first of which reduces the train time of infantry and cavalry by 15%. Now obviously this card is not nearly as useful as fencing skill or riding skill, which represents a 40% reduction in the train time of infantry and cavalry, but the 15% is obviously going to be beneficial because it means you're pumping out military units at a faster pace. The second card, which increases infantry speed by 20%, whilst nice, is not really that relevant in treaty, where typically you'll be fighting two fronts slowly pushing back and forward into each other. And finally, the third card, which increases the gather rate from mines by 20%, is basically useless because you're not actually able to put a TP down until after the 40-minute mark, by which time you've already transitioned to estates which will have a higher gather rate even with the 20% increased gather rate from mines. Overall, the reduction in train time is the most valuable card that the Incas have, and it's obviously extremely important to ensure that all of your teammates, if you're playing on a team, get this upgrade. The next map we're going to take a look at is Central Plains, which gives you access to the Shaolin minor civilization. Now the unit you gain access to through this minor civilization is the Rattan Shield. Now this unit doesn't necessarily excel at killing anything, costs 50 food and 60 wood, counts as shock infantry, which means they're speedy boys, and they have a 16 build limit. It is important to note that just like Andes, Central Plains actually spawns 2 TPs on either side, which basically means that you'll have access to up to 32 of this particular unit. Additionally, there are a number of upgrades available. The first increases the gather rate of wood by 20%. Now depending on the map layout, you may actually be able to put your TP down before the 40-minute timer has elapsed. In this case, this upgrade is actually fairly valuable, as it allows you to obviously gather more wood than you otherwise would, no pun intended. But typically, you actually won't be able to put your TP down until after the 40-minute timer has elapsed, where most of the wood will have actually already been gathered, by which point this card will not be as useful. The second upgrade increases the melee damage of your ranged units. For units like musketeers, which will typically be going between ranged and melee to deal with cavalry, this is a fantastic upgrade. It is important to note that Sweden only get a plus 10% melee bonus. Regardless, this upgrade is not essential, it just enhances the melee capacity of your units. And finally, the last upgrade further increases the attack damage of the Rattan Shield. Overall, this minor civilization is okay, but there are definitely other maps that have better minor civilizations. Now speaking of better maps with better minor civilizations, you next have Dakota, which gives you access to both the Cree and the Comanche minor civilizations. Firstly, just like Central Plains, a number of the benefits that you can actually get through the various Dakota civilizations are very much dependent on the spawn of the TPs, where sometimes you're able to build the TP before the 40-minute mark, and other times you have to build it after the 40-minute mark. The first minor civilization we'll take a look at is Cree. So firstly, you have access to the Cree tracker, which excels at killing heavy infantry. They cost 40 food and 80 wood, count as ranged infantry, and have a ridiculous amount of HP. Additionally, they're limited to 13 units. Furthermore, the Cree minor civilization gives you access to CDBs, which are the French settler. They cost 120 food each, have a build limit of 5, and gather the same as a French settler. So assuming you can get the TP down before the 40-minute mark, let's see how many resources these guys can make for you. Now mill with all the available upgrades will have about a gather rate of 2 food per second. Obviously on French mills this will be a little bit higher, but not all civs have access to food silos and various other techs, so I'm just rounding it down to 2. Now taking into consideration the reduction in the food per second that occurs when a villager walks from A to B, if you'd like some more information on this, feel free to check out my 7 or 10 villages on a mill video. This will result in about a 35% reduction in the overall food per second. In this case, it results in a food of 1.3 per second. Now when multiplied by the 5 CDBs, this equates to about an extra 6.5 food per second. Now when multiplied by a minute, this equates to about 390 food per minute. Now when multiplied by 20, which from the 20-minute mark onwards is typically when you'll have your villagers on mills or on estates constantly until the end of treaty, but having 5 CDBs on mills for the 20 minutes at 390 food per minute equates to about an extra 7,800 food per 20 minutes. And now this is obviously fantastic and should be exploited in every instance that you're able to get the TP before the 40-minute mark. Additionally, the Cree have 3 upgrades. The first increases the build limit of their military unit by 50%. This is obviously fine. The second reduces building wood cost by 25%. Now for some bigger maps this might be more advantageous, but for Dakota, where the fighting lanes are fairly small, you're actually not going to be putting a whole lot of resources into building an FB. However, if you can grab this upgrade before the 40-minute mark, you can put down some of your more costly buildings like your mills and your estates for much cheaper, saving you a fair amount of wood. This upgrade is especially beneficial for the French, who through their unique church tech increase the building costs by 50%. Finally, their last card increases the HP of cavalry and infantry by 5%. While this is not a significant amount of HP increase, it's still nice to have, as it increases the efficiency of the resources you spend on units. You next have the Comanche minor settlement, which gives you access to the Comanche horse archer, which excels at killing cavalry and artillery. They each cost 70 food and 60 wood, counts as ranged cavalry, and has a build limit of 10. The Comanche also have 3 upgrades which are fairly useful. The first increases cavalry and shock infantry hit points by 10%. For civilizations that rely on cavalry a little bit heavier than others, this card is obviously fantastic. Additionally, a further upgrade increases the cavalry and shock infantry speed by 5%. As discussed previously, minor increases to speed, especially in treaty, are fairly irrelevant, as is typically 2 forces fighting head-to-head, where a 5% increase of speed is not going to change the course of the battle. The final upgrade for the Comanche reduces the coin cost of research items by 10%. So this includes upgrades to mills and estates, as well as upgrades to units. As many of the other upgrades previously mentioned, the usefulness of this upgrade is very much dependent if you can get the trade post down before 40 minutes, where if you're not able to put the trade post down until after 40 minutes, where you should already have all of your upgrades, this upgrade is basically useless. Overall, Dakota is a fairly balanced map, where each team gets one of each of the minor settlements. And with a combination of economic and military upgrades, the combination of these minor civilizations is a good one. The next map we're going to take a look at is Decan or Deacon, depending on your personal preference. On this particular map, there are always 2 native trade posts available, one available to each side. And also, there are 3 minor settlements that are native to this map. Now, because of this, there can be any combination of the minor settlements. In fact, there can be multiple of the same minor settlement. It's always randomized when going into the map. First, let's take a look at the Bhatki minor civilization, which gives you access to the unit the Tiger Claw. Now, the Tiger Claw excels at killing all infantry, but it also has a negative modifier when fighting heavy infantry. This basically means that it excels at dealing with skirmishes. It costs 60 food and 50 wood, counts as shock infantry, and has an 18 build limit. Additionally, this particular minor settlement gives you access to 3 upgrades, the first of which increases the HP of the Tiger Claw by 50%. Now this is a fine upgrade. The second upgrade increases the damage of cavalry and infantry by 5%. While this is not as good as having a buff to HP, it's obviously still always good to increase the damage of your units. Finally, the last card increases the gather rate of berry bushes by 40%. This card is useless. When you take into consideration that you're actually not able to put a trade post down until after 40 minutes, where you already have all of your upgrades on your mills, this 40% increase to the berry gather rate is useless. The next minor civilization we're taking a look at is the Udasi minor settlement. It is important to note that this particular minor civilization is also available in Punjab, and as Punjab does not have any other minor civilizations that you're actually able to get on that map, I'll just be combining the review of Punjab into this review with Deccan. This minor civilization gives you access to the chakram. Now this particular unit has an AoE attack, and they excel at dealing with heavy infantry. However, they do fairly poorly against cavalry and shock infantry. Now this particular unit costs 100 food, 50 wood, counts as ranged infantry, and has a 12 build limit. Additionally, this minor settlement has access to 3 upgrades. Now the first upgrade increases the gather rate from mills and estates by 10%, which is obviously fantastic. Now to get a better understanding of how much this will actually equate to, let's take a look at some numbers. Now like all upgrades, the upgrades that are available through this minor settlement affect the base value, which in this case for mills is a gather rate of 0.67. Now, when you take into consideration the approximate 30% reduction in gather rates, if you like some information on that, feel free to check out my 7 vs 10 villages on mills. But when you take into consideration that 30% reduction, it leaves you with about 0.469 food per second. Now, 10% of this, which is the 10% increase that we're looking at, equates to about 0.0469 extra food per second. Now, when you multiply this by 60, you get an extra 2.814 food extra per minute. Now, when you multiply this by 40 villages, you get an extra 112.56 extra food per minute per 40 villages. Now, when you multiply this by 20 minutes, you're sitting at about 2,251.2 extra food per 20 minutes per 40 villages. So whilst this is not a massive amount, it's still a nice amount of food to have. Now I won't go into the maths behind the coin, but it follows the same logic. I'll show it on the screen. But it equates to about an extra 1,848 extra coin per 20 minutes per 40 villages. Now this is obviously great. Is it amazing? Not really, but extra resources are always good, so I can't complain. The next upgrade increases the ranged attack maximum range and the LOS of the chakrams by 2. Next. The final one increases your explorer's hit points by 50%. When you consider that an explorer has around 3,000 HP with the capital upgrades, you might be thinking, plus 50%? That is fantastic. An explorer with 4,500 HP? Sign me up. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, the increase of 50% is applied to the base value of your explorer's HP, which is obviously not anywhere near 3,000. In fact, it's 400. This basically means that your explorer's HP is being increased by 200, which is not that impressive, but hey, it adds up. The return on investment for this is definitely there. It's just not nearly as impressive as having an extra 1,500 HP. Now, the final native civilization we'll be taking a look at is the Sufi minor civilization. It's important to note that this civilization is available on both Deccan and on Fertile Crescent. Now, as there are no further civilizations available on Fertile Crescent, I'll just be combining that review with the Deccan review. However, it is important to note that on Fertile Crescent, you are typically able to grab the TP before the 40-minute mark, which for some of their upgrades is extremely important. Where on the other hand, with Deccan, it's very unlikely to be able to grab the TP before the 40-minute mark unless you have an unusual spawn on a 1v1. Now, the Sufi minor civilization gives you access to the war elephant, which is basically a smaller yet bigger version of the French Gen. Like the Tiger Claw, it excels at killing all infantry, however, it has a negative multiplier when fighting heavy infantry. As such, it is good at killing skirmishers. Additionally, it has an AoE. It costs 200 food, 80 wood, counts as hand cavalry, and has a build limit of 8. Additionally, like the other minor civilizations, they have access to 3 upgrades. The first of which gives a fattened goat every 2 minutes of the game up until 30 minutes, so you'll get a maximum of 15 fattened goats. So when you get this card past 30 minutes, you obviously queue some villagers onto it to gather food, because you'll typically be able to gather food from the goats faster than you will be able to gather it from mills. The next card increases the gather rates of everything by 10%, however it decreases the HP of your villagers by 40%. Now the reduced HP is fairly irrelevant. The only reason that this is a negative aspect is obviously villagers that are building your FB, who die fairly quickly anyway. Now, I won't go into the exact maths behind every single one of these differences, but from my previous calculations, obviously the increase to the mill and estates is about 2,000 food and 2,000 coin over 20 minutes with 40 villagers gathering. And finally, the last card increases your villager build limit by 10%. Now, on Deccan, where you're not typically able to grab the TP before 40 minutes, this is a fairly irrelevant card, as you don't want to be overpopping with villagers, because that means your army is going to be smaller. And obviously, this will change depending on the matchup and who has priority. But generally speaking, you won't want to be building over your build limit, and in some cases, you actually want to be reducing the number of villages you have. But again, it very much depends on the situation. However, on Fertile Crescent, where you're typically able to grab the trade post before the 40-minute mark, this will allow you to get a much bigger economy over time. Now again, I won't go into the specifics of the maths behind the resources you're able to gather from getting this card, but it's common sense that having an extra 10% villages, in the case of the European civs, I guess apart from the Dutch and the French, having an extra 9 villages is obviously going to make a fairly significant impact on the amount of resources you're going to be able to gather. But that pretty much covers it off for the minor civilizations for both Deccan and Fertile Crescent. While some of the upgrades are fairly lackluster, some of the military and economic upgrades offered by these civilizations, whilst not having a significant impact, are definitely nice to haves. So where possible, I definitely recommend getting the upgrades. The next map we're going to be taking a look at is Grand Chow. Now, the only minor civilization that is available on this map is the Tupi, which is also available on Ori. Now, the first unit that is available through this minor civilization is the Blackwood Archer, which excels at fighting heavy infantry and light cavalry. Costs 50 food and 50 wood, counts as ranged infantry, and has a build limit of 16. It is important to note on Grand Chow that if you're playing with up to 4 players, 2 trade posts will spawn, meaning that if you own both trade posts, you will have a limit of 32. On the other hand, if you're playing with 6 or more players, 3 trade posts will spawn, which will obviously increase this limit even further. The Tupi also have access to 3 upgrades. The first of which reduces building costs by 20%. Now, just like the minor settlement we discussed previously that had a very similar upgrade, this is okay, but nothing substantial. Now, it is important to note that this upgrade is a lot more valuable on Grand Chow than it is on Ori, just because you're typically building a lot more military buildings in a forward position on Grand Chow than in Ori, but despite this, it is still not a fantastic upgrade. The next upgrade increases archer damage by 10%, of which it obviously includes the Blackwood Archer. Now, this is a fairly useless card for most civilizations, however for Inca and British that make use of archer units in Imperial, this obviously provides some benefit. The final upgrade allows your hero to train cougars. Now, Buttercup, the pet cougar, does not excel at killing anything, and is more so of a meat shield than anything else. It costs 100 food, and has a build limit of 12. This is not affected by the number of TPs you have, so if you have 1 or 3, the build limit will still be 12. But obviously you do not need to own the TP, you simply need to have researched the technology to be able to train this unit for the rest of the game. Overall, Blackwood Archer as a unit is not bad, however their upgrades are fairly lackluster compared to some of the other minor civilizations. So we're already taking a look at Ori, so we'll continue with the minor civilizations that are also available to them. Now in Age of Empires 3, they had a number of minor civilizations available to them. However, when I've been undertaking testing, I've only ever been able to spawn both a Tupi settlement and a Maya settlement. So I'm unsure if the devs have taken away the other minor civilizations. So for the purposes of this video, we'll just be taking a look at the 2 minor civilizations that I believe are available in Ori. So as I've mentioned, the other one is the Maya minor civilization. It's important to note that the Maya minor civilization is also available on Mexico. Now the Maya minor civilization have access to 2 units, the first of which is the Hulkan Spearman. Now this particular unit excels at dealing with cavalry and shock infantry. It costs 75 food, 25 wood, counts as heavy infantry, and has a build limit of 17. Additionally, Maya have a second unit available to them, the Healer. Now a Healer is really bad in combat, and as I'm sure you've guessed, heals. Now the Healer is not actually that useful because it will not heal units in combat. So the unit has to be out of combat and heals about 10 HP per second. They cost 200 food and have a build limit of 4. Now unlike every other minor civilization we previously looked at, Maya only have 2 upgrades available. The first increases hand infantry hit points by 20%. Now for civilizations that make use of hand infantry, whether that be the various native civilizations, like Iro, Aztec, and Inca, the Asian civilizations, specifically Japan and China, or some of the Euro civilizations that make use of halbs or similar units. This is obviously a fantastic card. This hit points increase is substantial and is 2 times that offered by any of the other minor civilizations we've previously had a look at. For those aforementioned civilizations that make use of hand infantry, this card is fantastic. Additionally, the second upgrade that Maya has increases the gather rate from mills by 10%. Now this is obviously the same upgrade that you get from a number of other civilizations, and it equates to about 2,000 food over 20 minutes under the consideration that about 40 villages are on. Now that's obviously only a general number, and that will change depending on the exact cards that you're sending as well as the civilization that you're playing. However, it will be about an extra 2,000 food per 20 minutes. Overall, despite only having 2 upgrades, the Maya Civ is one of the best, I feel. The significant boost to HP of hand infantry, as well as the increase to gather rates from mills, sets them apart from some of the lower tier minor civilizations. Now on Mexico, but not on Ori, players are able to align themselves with the Zapotec native civilization. Now through this minor civilization, players are able to create the Lightning Warrior, which is a unit which excels dealing with cavalry, heavy infantry, and shock infantry. The unit costs 40 food, 60 wood, counts as heavy infantry, and has a 15 build limit. The Zapotec minor civilization also has 3 upgrades that are available to players. The first of which is a crate of 100 wood for every 2 minutes of the game up until 30 minutes, which obviously equates to 1.5k wood. Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with this card, it's nothing amazing, but an extra 1.5k wood is always good. The second increases hand infantry damage by 20%. Now, obviously, on Mexico, if you're also allied with the Maya civilization, which increases HP of hand infantry by 20%, a further increase of the damage by 20%, it's obviously fantastic. If I had to pick one or the other, I'd pick an increase of HP hands down every time. Obviously, you're not going to be complaining about increasing the damage that your hand infantry does. Obviously, this upgrade is not particularly relevant for civilizations that don't make use of hand infantry that often, but for civilizations that do make use of hand infantry, this card is obviously great. The final upgrade for this minor civilization increases the gather rates of mills and estates by 10%. It also increases the gather rate for berry bushes by 10%, but that's basically irrelevant. Now, as previously discussed, a 10% increase in the gather rates to mills and estates will equate to about 2,000 food and coin over 20 minutes, assuming there are 40 villages on. Now, obviously, if you have the Maya and the Zapotec upgrades, they won't multiply together. However, they're instead applied to the base value. So you're basically getting 2,000 food from the Maya upgrade and 2,000 food and 2,000 coin from the Zapotec upgrade. It is important to note that only the Zapotec upgrade affects estates as well, where the Maya upgrade only affects mills. Overall, just like the Maya civilization, I feel the Zapotec civilization is also fairly good. It's obviously more beneficial for civilizations that make use of hand infantry, but regardless, the combination of both military and economic upgrades are obviously fantastic. Now the next map we're going to be taking a look at is Ozarks. Now in this particular map, each side will always get one trade post, and it will contain one of three minor civilizations. The first of these is Comanche, something we've already covered in the Dakota overview. So if you'd like more information on Comanche, feel free to go back to that section. The second minor civilization that is available is Cheyenne. The unit that is available through this minor civilization is the Rider. This unit excels at fighting cavalry and shock infantry, costs 95 food and 90 wood, counts as hand cavalry, and has a build limit of 10. Additionally, this minor civilization has 3 techs available to the player. The first increases the damage of the Rider against cavalry and shock infantry. This card's not bad, it helps to improve the fairly lackluster bonuses that the Rider initially had and makes them fairly good at dealing with cavalry. The second upgrade reduces the train time of cavalry by 40%. Now this is in line with riding school, which when combined with the church tech allows you to instantly spawn your cavalry. This is obviously a good card. And finally, the third card spawns 12 bison on the home city gather point. Now this is not bad, but generally by the time that you send this card, you have already got your upgrades on mills, which surpasses the gather rates that you would have on bison. Civilizations like Lakota, however, that have a number of upgrades that enhance the gather rate from huntables, this will be a great card regardless of the time you get it. Overall, this minor civilization is not bad. However, the only upgrade that is really valuable is the one that reduces the train time of their cavalry. The other native civilization that is available are the Cherokee. Now, aligning yourself with the Cherokee allows you to create the Cherokee Rifleman. Now, the Rifleman excels at dealing with heavy infantry and light cavalry, costs 60 food, 60 wood, counts as ranged infantry, and has a build limit of 16. This unit is obviously very similar to the legendary tracker that is available through Cree, which is available through Dakota. And although has a bit less health than the tracker, it has increased damage. Again, if you'd like more information on the Cree minor civilization, feel free to go back to the Dakota section. The Cherokee native civilization also has 3 upgrades available to the player. The first delivers 4 settlers. Now this might not seem particularly impressive, however, this allows you to overpop on villages. So if you've reached your maximum number of villages, i.e. say 99, and then you send this card, you will have 103 villages. Now I won't go into the specifics behind the maths of the extra resources this gets for you, but obviously having more villages equals more resources. The next upgrade increases native warrior speed by 20%. Now this is obviously a very similar upgrade to the Inca minor civilization. However, the Inca minor civilization provides a 20% speed boost to all of your troops. This just applies to native warriors. Now just like the previous card, a speed boost is not that relevant, Whilst obviously being able to move faster is ideal, generally speaking, you're fighting on a head-on engagement where speed is not a determining factor in who wins or loses. But obviously this card is not bad to have. The final upgrade removes the wood cost from all upgrades in the market, dock, mill, and estate. Now this upgrade is not especially relevant in the market because the only resource gathering increases that have a wood cost are available in Age 1 and 2, obviously for both gathering food and coin faster. Now obviously to build a trade post costs 200 wood, and then this upgrade costs 100 food and 100 coin. These resources obviously much better spent elsewhere, because by removing the costs for the Age 2 upgrades, you're only saving yourself 325 wood. Where the trade post costs 200 wood, and then 100 coin and 100 food, that's obviously 400 resources. But obviously for the mill and estate, where the wood costs, especially for the estate, are fairly substantial, this will allow you to save thousands of wood. So it's obviously a worthwhile upgrade to get before you get your mill and estate upgrades. The final map in the treaty map pool that we'll be taking a look at is Pampas Sierras. On this map, the minor civilization Mapuche are available. It's important to note that on this map there are 4 trade posts available, so being able to control all of them will result in a large amount of native warriors. The first unit that is available through this minor civilization is the Ironwood Clubman. The Clubman exceeds at dealing with cavalry and shock infantry. Costs 100 food, 65 wood, counts as heavy infantry, and has a build limit of 8. The second unit that is available is the Bowler Rider. This unit excels at dealing with heavy cavalry and artillery. Costs 90 food, 90 wood, counts as light range cavalry, and has a build limit of 8. This minor civilization also has 3 upgrades available to the player. The first reduces the coin cost of units by 10%. This is obviously a great upgrade because in treaty games you're typically building hundreds if not thousands of similar units, most of which will have a gold cost. And over time this 10% reduction will result in thousands of extra coin. The second upgrade increases hand infantry siege attack damage by 50%. Now this is not a particularly relevant card because generally speaking you'll be using mortars to get through buildings, but it's not a bad card to have. The final upgrade gives you a 100 coin crate for every 2 minutes of the game up to 30 minutes. This means that you'll be getting up to 1500 coin, which is obviously great. Again, it's not an amazing card that will result in thousands upon thousands upon thousands of extra resources gained over time, like some of the economic upgrades. However, it's always nice to get a lump sum of coin. But that pretty much sums it up for the treaty map pool. There are obviously other maps that have different native civilizations on it, but this video has already gone on for a substantial amount of time, and dedicating time to these other native civilizations that you're not really ever going to see would obviously just extend the length of the video. Now that we've had a detailed look into each of the minor civilizations that are available through the treaty map pool, let's take a look at a ranking or a tier list of all of the native civilizations in Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition. Now firstly, I'll be ranking the aforementioned native civilizations that are obviously tied to the treaty map pool, after which I'll then be ranking the additional civs in the same tier list. Now it is important to note that the treaty map pool, for whatever reason, is not the map pool that is actually used for ranked. I'm hoping this will be fixed in the near distant future because I don't really think it makes sense to have a treaty map pool and for it to not be in ranked. I just don't get it, which is part of the reason why I'm also including this tier list of the other civs that are not in the treaty map pool. Obviously, if you'd like some more information surrounding any of the civs I've talked about, or any of the civs that I haven't talked about but are in the tier list, you can obviously look them up on the wiki, which provide a lot more detail than I'm currently providing. Additionally, I'll be making another video that talks about the major civilizations and their capacity for using the various minor civilizations, as well as including a tier list of them. Ideally, I would have liked to include it in this video, but the video's already gone on for far too long just going over each of the treaty minor civilizations. So without further ado, here's the tier list. So firstly, we have Incas. Incas have good units, good military upgrades, but obviously no eco upgrades. They're one of the only civilizations that actually reduce the train time of all of your units. Because of this, they're getting an A. Shaolin, dodgy units, dodgy upgrades, C. Cree, good unit and alright upgrades. Additionally, they also have CDBs. This basically means that they're going to have an impact on your military and on your economy, and because of this, they're getting an S. Comanche, they have an alright unit and okay upgrades. For that, they're getting a B. Udasi, meh unit and mostly meh upgrades, B. Bhatki, alright unit, meh upgrades, getting a C. Now Sufi, obviously this civilization is available on both Fertile Crescent and Deccan, and they're a lot more beneficial on Fertile Crescent, with a 10% increase to villages as well as the increased gather rate of resources is obviously going to be more impactful on a game that you're able to get the trade post down before the 40 minutes, which you're able to do on Fertile Crescent, but not on Deccan. So on Fertile Crescent, the Sufi easily get an S. On Deccan, it'll be an A. Tupi, alright unit, meh upgrades, C. Zapotec, good unit, good upgrades, especially for hand infantry centered civilizations, A. Maya, alright unit, good upgrades, again, especially for hand infantry centered civilizations. So these are the likes of Inca, Aztec, and a number of the European civilizations that make use of halbs and related infantry units. Again, like Zapotec, A, but potentially a B. Cherokee, good unit, alright upgrades, B. Mapuche, crap units. Their units are extremely expensive for what they do. The only saving grace for Mapuche is that they have the 10% coin reduction upgrade. So they're on the cusp of swinging between a C and a B. I'm going to chuck them in C just because everything apart from that one upgrade is crap. Now that's the treaty native civilizations done. Let's take a look at some of the other civilizations. So firstly, we have Carib, meh units and meh upgrades, C. So next you have Nakuda, meh units and bad upgrades, D. Seminole, meh units and meh upgrades, unless you're Inca in Britain, in which case you can obviously make use of the increased arrow damage. This civ's getting a D. Apache, alright unit, meh upgrades, they're getting a C. Huron, alright unit, alright upgrades, they're getting a B. Klamath, alright unit, alright upgrades, getting a B. Navajo, alright unit, alright / good upgrades. They're good if you are a herding civilization and can make use of the increased fattening bonus that they get. I guess if you're a herding civ, they're an A, but if otherwise, they're probably a B. Jesuit, I'm not exactly sure I pronounced that properly. Alright unit, meh upgrades, C. You next have Cheyenne, meh unit, meh upgrades, B. And finally, you have Zen, alright unit, meh upgrades, B. So I guess based on my ranking of all the different native civilizations, there's actually quite a spread. Now, you might obviously have a different perspective on which native civilizations are good and which are bad, and that's fine. Power to you. This is just my perception on the overall usefulness from both a unit perspective as well as the upgrades that affect both the military and economy. But that pretty much sums it up for the video. Today we've had a quick look at the importance of using native civilizations in treaty games. We've taken a look at the upgrades you can get through the capital or through the TC if you're playing civilizations from war chiefs or Asian dynasties. And then we've obviously had a look at a bit more of a detailed breakdown of the various minor civilizations that you'll find in the treaty map pool. And then finally, we've broken down all the native civilizations in a tier list. Again, as I mentioned previously, and as I mentioned towards the start of the video, I was looking to provide some more information on how to play and make use of native civilizations. This video has simply gone on for too long, so I'll be making a follow-up video at some point in the future, which will go over this in a bit more detail. But I hope you've learned a thing or two. I know I definitely have, looking into the specific details behind all these native civilizations. If you have any questions related to any of the content that I've discussed in this video or my other videos, feel free to chuck a comment below the video, or feel free to come and check me out on Twitch or on Discord. Links to those are in the description. But whatever the case, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day/night, and I'll catch you guys again another time. Bye.